When Drew asked if they could stay just for a little while, his voice still carried the boyish charm I'd nursed through 100 skinned knees and broken curfews, and I, like every mother who remembers the weight of their child before they had words, said yes without hesitation. They'd only been married 2 months, and Megan, all expensive perfume and sharp smiles, stood beside him in my doorway with her arms looped around his like she already belonged to the walls. I cleared out the master bedroom that weekend, boxing up decades of photo albums, winter coats, and handwritten letters from my late husband, so they'd have space to start fresh. I didn't just open the door. I opened my life. I cooked every dinner, set the table with linen napkins, folded their laundry with lavender softener, and paid the water bill without comment, even when the showers stretched past 40 minutes. Megan brought her curated little world with her, vases that didn't hold flowers, scented candles that made the house smell like an upscale department store, and a wireless speaker that filled the living room with music I couldn't place but knew wasn't for me. She called it modernizing and bringing light in, and I smiled and stepped back like I was meant to fade into the wallpaper. They promised they'd be out in 6 months, tops. But I knew before the leaves started turning that they had no timeline, only comfort. My house, once humming with rhythm and routine, became a stage where I cooked and cleaned quietly in the wings, while the newlyweds played house under my roof. No one asked how I was sleeping on the smaller mattress. No one thanked me for the fresh-baked bread or the stocked fridge, and still I let it go. Because mothers do that, don't we? We stretch, we fold, we vanish into helpfulness. But even the softest bedsheets wear thin when walked over long enough. And something in me, something older, quieter, smarter, was beginning to feel the first tug of fabric pulling loose. What happened next will shock you. But before we continue, hit that subscribe button for more stories like this. At first it was small. A fork left in the sink, a trail of shoes by the door, a lipstick smear on the guest towel that I'd fold back neatly without a word. Megan had a way of breezing through the house like it was a hotel suite, all soft sighs and clipped thank yous that rarely made it past her teeth. She planned brunches with friends in my sunroom, turned my good towels into yoga mats, and forgot to mention dinner plans until I was already plating a roast. I told myself it was just adjustment, the awkward tango of shared space. But slowly, the rhythm turned lopsided. One afternoon, I came home from the grocer's to find a brightly coloured chart stuck to the fridge with heart-shaped magnets. At first glance, it looked like a school project. Pastel markers, looping handwriting, days of the week labelled across the top like a game board. Then I looked closer. Under Monday, vacuuming was my name. Tuesday, laundry? Me again. Thursday, bathrooms. Guess who? Drew had one square, take out trash, and even that was left unchecked. Megan's row was spotless, untouched, like she'd been assigned the role of executive supervisor rather than housemate. No one had asked me. No one had told me. It had simply appeared. And when I asked about it, Megan gave a theatrical little laugh, like I was being silly for not understanding the system. "You like to keep things tidy, Helen," she said, sipping her green smoothie from a glass I hadn't seen used in years. "We figured you'd prefer having your days." Your days, not our days. Not the house's days. Mine. As if the place I'd owned for 40 years had suddenly become their Airbnb, and I was just the hired help who forgot to clock out. I nodded politely, of course, I always did, but something in my chest shifted. It wasn't anger yet. It was awareness, the sharp edge of knowing you've been demoted in your own home, handed a list instead of a conversation. And for the first time, I looked at the fridge, not as a place to post family memories, but as a bulletin board announcing I'd been reassigned. The morning of my 64th birthday started like any other Tuesday. Quiet, uneventful, the kettle hissing its usual tune while the birds outside squabbled over the last of the summer figs. I waited for something, even something small. A text, a card tucked under my teacup, a breakfast plate not cooked by my own hand. But the house buzzed only with the sound of Megan clicking through her laptop, mumbling about a vendor mix-up, and Drew asking where the good coffee had gone. I said nothing. I smiled, nodded, and folded towels. By afternoon, the silence wrapped around me like damp wool. Not even a happy birthday in passing. That Saturday, I woke to a different energy. Barking, the smell of pastries, the thud of boxes hitting the kitchen counters. Megan had organised a catered brunch for their golden retriever, complete with quiche bites, champagne splits, and napkins embroidered with the dog's name, Sir Winston. A pink banner stretched across the sunroom window, flanked by helium balloons, and the florist arrived an hour early with a bouquet larger than any I'd received in years. Guests began trickling in, cooing over Winston in his bow tie, while Megan floated from room to room, orchestrating it all like a proud society hostess. I stayed upstairs. No one asked where I was. I sat on the edge of the guest bed, my bed now, and watched as my reflection blinked back at me from the vanity mirror. I thought of birthdays past. The lemon cake my husband once made with too much zest. The year Drew painted me a mug in second grade and told me I was his favourite person in the world. Those memories felt like postcards from another life, still colourful, but mailed from someplace I could no longer return to. That evening, I came down to clean. Crumbs on the table, paw prints on the floor, champagne flutes left half full like afterthoughts. No one noticed. I rinsed the flutes, loaded the dishwasher, and gently peeled the napkin from beneath a half-eaten pastry. It read, in gold script, "Every good boy deserves a celebration." I stared at it for a long moment, then folded it into my pocket, not as a keepsake, but as proof. Proof that in this house, even the dog got more birthday love than the woman who paid the light bill. It was a Friday night, and the house smelled like rosemary flatbread and expensive perfume. Megan had invited her Pilates circle over, all gleaming hair and wine laughter, their voices slipping through the hallway like oil across water. I kept to the kitchen, as I usually did, topping off the charcuterie board Megan had asked me to help out with, as if I didn't know she meant make from scratch. I'd just set down the olives when I heard it, her voice light and careless, as if she were commenting on the weather. I mean, it's hard to host when the maid's still living here, you know? The room erupted in a soft chorus of understanding giggles, the kind that tighten your spine and curdle your stomach all at once. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just stood there with my hand still on the cheese knife, staring at the marble countertop like it had just betrayed me. The maid. Not my husband's mother. Not Helen. Just the maid. I wasn't shocked. No, that would have required expecting better. But it landed differently this time. It didn't hit like an insult. It hit like a verdict. A final declaration that I was no longer a person in her eyes. Just a fixture. Something that blended into the wallpaper and wiped down the counters. I could have walked in, could have confronted her, reminded her whose name was still on the deed. But I didn't. Not then. Instead, I turned the water on at the sink to drown out their voices and began scrubbing a spotless dish until the skin on my hands wrinkled. Rage didn't come. Not yet. What came was something cooler, quieter, sharper. Like the click of a lock you forgot existed. That night, Long after the guests had left, and Megan had gone to bed with a glass of wine and a self-satisfied sigh, I opened the drawer where I kept the house papers, the old documents, the things they never asked about because they assumed it all belonged to them now. I read them slowly, carefully, like a woman reading the blueprints to her own escape hatch. I wasn't just going to leave. I was going to make sure they noticed the emptiness I left behind. There's a particular kind of satisfaction in knowing something other people don't, especially when they've built their world on the illusion that you've quietly handed yours over. I never signed the house away. Not when Drew asked me to consider putting it in all our names for efficiency. Not when Megan joked that it would just simplify taxes. Not even when they started having mail sent here addressed as the Barretts, like I was already a ghost. I had smiled, deflected, promised to think about it after the holidays, and then never thought about it again. Until now. That night, I sat at my bedroom desk, the old wooden one with the shallow drawer that stuck, unless you tugged it just right, and pulled out the original deed. My name, no co-signers, notarized and filed before Megan even knew how to spell our last name. My fingers moved with a calm I hadn't felt in years, clicking through folders, bank statements, even the dusty login for my online storage rental, Unit 214, climate-controlled, with just enough space to hold everything that ever mattered. I booked it again on the spot. The next morning, I withdrew a modest sum from my savings, the same account they never asked about because I'd let them assume that once I retired, my resources did too. I started gathering the little things first. Photo albums, birth certificates, letters from my mother, and the silver locket Drew made for me in 5th grade with his initials etched crookedly inside. Not because I needed to take them with me, but because I wanted to know what they wouldn't think to value. Each item went into a box labelled in my own handwriting, quiet proof that I was still here, still present, still planning. I didn't rage, didn't slam doors. I wore my silence like armor and let them keep believing I was just tired, or slow, or small. Let them joke about my old routines. Because when the moment came, it wouldn't be loud. It would be surgical, precise, and irreversible. Like a signature you never saw until it was too late. The office hadn't changed much since the days I'd passed it on my way to school. Same ivy climbing up the side, same window boxes with geraniums fighting to stay bright against the heat. But the face that greeted me inside had grown into something surprising. Sandra Pierce, once a shy 10th grader in my English class who'd struggled with thesis statements and breakups alike, now stood before me in a tailored blazer, a Bluetooth earpiece perched like punctuation. "Mrs. Barrett?" she said, blinking, then broke into a smile so wide it softened the years between us. We sat for an hour, maybe more, drinking weak coffee out of paper cups and catching up, her 2 kids, my quiet life. And finally, the reason I was there. "I'm thinking of selling," I told her, laying the folder on the table with the deed still crisp inside. She didn't pry, just nodded with the kind of calm you get from balancing a life between offers and disappointments. Discretion, I told her, was the only thing I required. No signs, no noisy showings, no hints to my tenants/family. She understood before I even finished the sentence. By the end of the week, we had a buyer lined up, an older couple from Vermont, all cash, closing flexible. I didn't feel guilt, I felt gravity. And in that same breath, I signed a lease on a small rental cottage 2 towns over, weathered siding, white trim, with a screened-in porch that overlooked the sea like it owed it nothing. The owner, a retired postmaster named Arlene, offered me the place at a discount when I told her I used to teach. "We need more women like you out here," she said, handing over the keys. I drove home with the windows down and the radio off, letting the silence settle in my chest like fresh air. Back at the house, Megan was on the phone again, barking at a florist over peonies. Drew was in the garage, half listening, half vanishing. I passed through them like smoke, unseen and unbothered, carrying my folder up to the room that used to be mine. They had no idea a storm was coming. But storms don't always thunder. Sometimes they just close escrow. The morning I left, the sky was still the colour of dishwater, and the world hadn't yet decided whether to rain or shine. I moved quietly, the way mothers do when they're trying not to wake a child. Except this time, I wasn't coming back with breakfast. The movers arrived right on time. 2 polite young men who didn't ask questions when I pointed to the upright piano I'd inherited from my grandmother, the boxes labelled "fragile" in my own hand, and the cat carrier with Jasper inside, blinking slowly like he too had known this day was coming. I'd already shut off the utilities, scheduled the disconnects down to the hour, power, water, gas, all timed to end just after I closed the front door behind me. The fridge was empty. The wine glasses had vanished. Even the framed family photos on the mantel were gone, the nail holes left like ghosts in the plaster. I didn't leave a note, a forwarding address, or a key. All I left was a manila envelope on the kitchen counter containing the legal notice of sale, the finalised deed transfer, and a brief clause about unauthorised occupants. No threat, no malice, just facts, dry as kindling. When Megan woke up, she'd flipped the light switch 3 times before realising the power wasn't coming back. She'd turn the faucet and hear only a groan in the pipes. She'd open the fridge and find nothing but a bag of wilted spinach and a half-used stick of butter. Then she'd see the envelope, bold type, official header, and finally understand that the maid she'd dismissed had packed more than boxes. She'd packed boundaries. Drew would call, of course, but not right away. He'd wait too long, and when he finally did, the call would go to voicemail. I didn't take joy in any of it, not really, but I took something better. Freedom, weighted with the silence of a house returned to itself. By 6:15, I was on the road with Jasper curled beside me and a sunrise stretching wide across the horizon. I didn't cry. I didn't second guess. I just drove. Towards salt air, open space, and a life that no longer required permission. By noon, Megan had tried every switch, every faucet, every remote, and still nothing worked. Not the hot water, not the stove, not even the Wi-Fi, which sent her spinning into full collapse faster than the power ever could. The air inside the house turned stale without the hum of electricity, and her voice, once high and sharp, was now ragged from yelling into the void of disconnected service lines. She tore through drawers looking for anything, paperwork, an extra key, maybe even a clue, until she stumbled upon a copy of the deed she'd never bothered to read. Her name wasn't on it. Not hers, not Drew's, just Helen's, in full block letters, with the ink still crisp. It was the first time Megan truly paused, not out of guilt, but fear, the cold, creeping realization that they didn't own this place, had never owned it, and couldn't even legally stay in it. The mortgage? Paid. The taxes? Up to date. But the deed, the soul of the house, belonged to the woman she'd once dismissed as just the maid. Megan, the self-declared strategist, had no map now, no equity, no legal leg to stand on. Just a dying bouquet of hydrangeas and a realtor's number she didn't dare call. Drew, bless him, paced in silence for a full hour before finally calling me, his voice panicked, tinny, like he was speaking through a storm drain. "Mum, what's happening?" he asked, like I'd vanished on a whim. I didn't yell, didn't scold, I let the weight of his question linger before answering. You built your life inside mine, I said evenly, but you forgot who laid the foundation. He stammered, said Megan didn't mean it, said things had gotten confusing. I could hear her hissing behind him, feeding him lines. You didn't just ignore me, I continued. You erased me, and now you want me to fix what you pretended wasn't mine. He fell quiet. No apology. No plan. Just the low hum of a son suddenly aware that his safety net had a spine. I ended the call with no promises, no rescue. Some lessons don't come wrapped in comfort. Some are delivered by silence, and a door that no longer opens. The second call came 2 days later, quieter this time, with Drew's voice softened by exhaustion and something else. Something that finally sounded like recognition. Mum, he started. We were wrong. I was wrong. Can you just come back? His words tripped over themselves, desperate and awkward, like someone trying to apologize in a language they'd never bothered to learn. I sat in my cottage's sunroom, the ocean breeze curling around my ankles, Jasper curled in my lap like a question already answered. I let the silence hang between us before I spoke. Drew, I never asked for much, I said gently, only respect. A place at the table, maybe even a birthday cake once in a while. He didn't interrupt, just listened, maybe for the first time in years. You let her call me the maid, I continued. But I was the one who kept that house warm. I was the one who cleaned the messes, paid the bills, folded your shirts long after you were old enough to do it yourself. I didn't ask to be thanked. I only wanted to be seen. The line went quiet again. I could hear a soft clatter in the background. Maybe Megan dropping something. Maybe Drew's pride falling off the edge of whatever shelf he'd put it on. You thought I wouldn't leave, I said. Because mothers don't, right? We stay, we bend, we become invisible so our children can shine. But I left, and I'm not coming back. Because I built that home once, and now I've built another, just for me. His voice cracked when he said my name again, softer than before. I love you, he offered, but the words were heavy with too much delay. I didn't say it back, not because I didn't feel it, but because love, like a house, needs more than foundation. It needs care, attention, the willingness to hold space for someone else. Take care of yourself, Drew, I said. And then I ended the call. Not out of anger, but peace. Sometimes closure isn't a slammed door. It's a quiet one that clicks shut behind you, with the sun warming your back and the tide moving steadily ahead. The tea steamed gently in the chipped porcelain cup I'd found at a local thrift shop. Its floral pattern faded but charming, like it had once belonged to another woman who knew the quiet joy of her own company. I sat on the porch wrapped in my cardigan, legs tucked beneath me, watching the tide pull and return with the same rhythm I'd grown to trust more than people. Jasper snored softly by the screen door, the wind tousling his fur as if even the sea had grown fond of him. There were no voices calling my name, no errands waiting, no sink full of other people's dishes, just the hush of waves and the call of gulls circling a sky untouched by ceilings. I wasn't angry anymore, not even a little. Bitterness is a heavy thing to carry, and I'd already hauled enough weight for one lifetime. What I felt was simpler, lighter, like linen on a summer line. Peace, perhaps, or the kind of satisfaction that settles into your bones when you finally choose yourself without needing to ask for permission. The cottage smelled of salt and lemon polish, and I'd hung the family photos back up, not out of nostalgia, but as reminders that even memories need boundaries. My days now were slow, unrushed. I gardened in the mornings, walked the beach in the afternoons, and read books by lamplight at night, the kind no one ever noticed me enjoying before. Sometimes I thought of Drew and wondered if he'd ever find the courage to build something of his own instead of living in borrowed spaces. I hoped he would. But I no longer needed to mother a man who'd forgotten I had a name beyond convenience. That morning, as I sipped my tea and watched the tide reach toward the shore again, I realized something with startling clarity. I hadn't just left the house. I had come home. And in that sacred, salt-washed stillness, with no audience and no applause, I let out the softest laugh. Not bitter, just better. Finally, wonderfully better.